Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first book discussion with authors of our new publication, Handbook of Open Universities Around the World. Published by the Routledge. I, Sanjay Mishra, along with my co-editor, Professor Santosh Panda, will facilitate this session. Today, we are privileged to have two OG people with us who have contributed to our book. Both are veterans in the field of open and distance education and are highly respected figures. Welcome to you both, Sir John and Professor Stephen. Thank you for joining us today. May I now request Professor Panda for a brief introduction of our guest and his initial remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjay. All friends, welcome to this podcast and special welcome to Sir John and Professor Stephen Murgatroyd. And they have been leading contributors to our book. The book is a huge one, but we invited about 80 open universities, including a few like Anadolu, which are huge distance learning systems in the world. And we finally got 47 institutions contributing to this, and about 113 authors from 33 countries which have contributed to this book. So John might talk about this a little more because he said that he also attempted to do an excellent work in this direction, but could not succeed. But we succeeded to have him as the lead author of the book. Sir John, thank you very much. And Steve, thank you once again for contributing to the American section of the book, which has 4 leading institutions, including Athabasca University. So friends, let me introduce 2 stalwarts. In fact, Sir John is for me, is the living legend of open and distance learning in the world today. If I say it that way, we have all grown, and Professor Steve, we have grown under the umbrella of such stalwarts like Professor Stephen Murgatroyd, including quite a few other legends who are no more on this earth. So, to briefly, because it will be very difficult to introduce John, but still I will try my best. Very briefly, Sir John was Vice President for Learning and Services at Athabasca University, the Canadian Open University. He was Vice Rector Academic of Concordia University in Canada, was a president, as they call his rector or something, rector, as we call it, rector of the Laurentian University in Canada. He was Vice Chancellor for a long time, 11 years, actually, of the mother Open University, the British Open University, as we call United Kingdom, or Open University of United Kingdom. He was Assistant Director General of UNESCO, and then finally the President and CEO of the Commonwealth of Learning, which is an intergovernmental organization in the Commonwealth for open and distance learning. In fact, his work has been recognized by 3 countries with 3 distinguished awards, national awards. In France, Order des Palmes Academics, United Kingdom, Knight's Bachelor for Services to Higher Education, and in Canada, Officer of the Order of Canada for his advancement of open learning and distance education in Canada and around the globe. Sir John is Honorary Fellow of St. Edmund's Hall, very prestigious Oxford University, the College of Preceptors, and the Commonwealth of Learning. And in fact, he won the Simon's Medal of the Association of Commonwealth Universities in 2008 and has 32 honorary doctorate degrees for universities in 17 countries. I think this must be very unique, as I understand. Profile author, and I must quote only one that was significant worldwide, sold thousands, if I say lakhs, that will be millions in copies, mega universities and all media. Technology strategies for higher education. This is, I think, the landmark book which led the policy and practice in many countries in the world, and revolutionized both open universities and more particularly the face-to-face conventional universities, because this book was not actually meant for open and distance learning. It was meant for all. So this revolutionized the higher education in the world. Professor Stephen Murgatroyd, he is a PhD, worked for Open University UK from 73 to 85, in Athabasca University from 86 to 98, and then again from 2003 to 2005. In fact, he has been an innovator in the use of technology. I'm sure he will talk about that a little more, about artificial intelligence. His latest book on artificial intelligence, The Future of Higher Education in an Age of Artificial Intelligence, is significant. And subsequently, the research paper on artificial intelligence and higher education that he wrote. And he is an innovator of technology and pioneered many innovative approaches to teaching, learning, and assessment. In fact, when I was in college, I was reading his papers. So he is much senior to us. He has 45 books, 250 academic papers. He currently teaches future studies at the University of Alberta and supervises graduate research studies and graduate research students in Athabasca University. In fact, in 2025 June, he received the King Charles III Coronation Medal from the Governor General of Canada. So with this, let me welcome once again Sir John Daniel and Professor Stephen Murgatroyd. Both, I think, are settled in Canada, unless John is settled elsewhere, but I understand they both have been settled in Canada. So welcome once again, sir, and Sir John, and Professor Steve. Over to you, Dr. Misra. If nothing else, let me welcome Sir John to present an initial remark to what he's going to say vis-a-vis the book, which has come up very well. And he's the first contributing author in the book. Sir John, now it is over to you.
Thank you very much, Santosh, for that nice introduction. And congratulations to Sanjaya Mishra and you for producing this magnificent book. And also, I want to congratulate Routledge for producing it in a very attractive format. It's a huge book, but it's a very easy book to read and to look through. I know how difficult it is to get open universities to work together on a project because, as you mentioned, I tried in 2017 at the ICDE conference in Toronto to gather a lot of open universities together to talk about the future. And I have to say, I was not very successful. It turned out to be a very small meeting, but you have managed to get over nearly 100 contributors to make over 50 papers from open universities all around the world, and that is a magnificent achievement. It's a telling commentary on our dividing world that this session is taking place just 3 days after the US Department of Justice declared that, quote, diversity, equity, and inclusion procedures are unlawful and discriminatory. I juxtapose that with the aims of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which are, quote, to ensure inclusive, equitable, quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Clearly, we cannot have it both ways. I believe we are at the end of a long period when many countries aligned to the ideological and political positions taken by the US government, whether they liked them or not. But that period is clearly over. Open universities are just one example of a global network of institutions that have embedded the ideals of diversity, equity, and inclusion so deeply into their work that there is no going back. These ideals are deeply entwined in the concept of openness, and that will be the subject of these short remarks, which I've entitled Fighting for Diversity, Equity and Inclusion in Higher Education. Let's go back to the beginning. Why are they called open universities? In the opening chapter of the book, I trace the origins of the name and what the pioneers meant by it when they conceived the UK Open University back in the 1960s. In its pre-project phase, the Open University, the UKOU, was first called the University of the Air because its political founder, British Prime Minister Harold Wilson, wanted to use radio and TV broadcasting to expand the limited reach of higher education to a much wider audience. A planning committee was formed to put flesh on the bones of the idea, and one of its early decisions was to change the name from the University of the Air to the Open University. The new institution would be named for its purpose to open higher education and not for the airwaves as one mechanism that it would use for its teaching. The first Chancellor of the UKOU, Lord Crowther, who was then the editor of the Economist newspaper, unpacked the meanings of openness in a brilliant short address at the inaugural ceremony held in 1969 by a wonderful coincidence in the week that human beings first landed on the moon. It was a time for new thinking. And Crowther's speech still moves me. He gave the UKOU its slogan, what we later called in Chinese style, the Four Opens. He said, "We will be open to people. Quote, no formal academic qualifications will be required for registration as a student. We will be open to places. Quote, the university has no cloisters, a word meaning closed. It will be disembodied and airborne. We will be open to methods. Quote, every new form of human communication will be examined to see how it can be used to raise and broaden the level of human understanding. And finally, we will be open to ideas. Quote, the limits not only of explorable space, but of human understanding are infinitely wider than we have believed. There are two aspects of education, both necessary. One regards the human mind as a vessel into which is to be poured as much as it will hold of the knowledge and experience by which human society lives and moves. This is the Martha of education, and we will have plenty of these tasks to perform. But the Mary regards the human mind rather as a fire that must be set alight and blown with the divine efflatus. Since that speech by Lord Crowther, there have been many other attempts to define the elements of openness. Somnaidu lists open access, open learning, and open scholarship. And this reminds us that the desire for openness in education has led to the development of open educational resources, open software, and open access to scholarship and research. And more recently, Sanjaya Mistra has pulled all this together in a list of what he calls the 10 affordances of openness, which are entry requirements, study location, time of learning, curricular flexibility, pedagogical approach, technology use, learning resources, assessment approach, recognition of credentials, and cost of education. And if each of these 10 features is rated on a 9-point scale between closed and open, institutions can rank themselves on their overall openness. The key point, of course, made frequently during the book, is that open universities should be open to being open in ways that meet the needs of their own jurisdiction. Because an open university attempting to be open on all those 10 dimensions would be too complex to be viable. Choices must be made. My final point is that although open universities must make good choices of teaching technologies and implement them effectively, they should not vest too much hope in artificial intelligence. It will eventually play a role in their work, but will not replace the creativity of dedicated teachers. Crowther hit the nail on the head. The human mind is both a vessel for knowledge and a fire to be set alight. Over my 11 years as Vice-Chancellor of the UKOU, I conversed with some 50,000 graduating students at well over 100 convocation ceremonies. Many told me of particular courses that had changed their lives by creating new perspectives and new opportunities. Open universities must retain the imagination to show that courses created by human intelligence can light fires in the mind as bright as those issuing from artificial intelligence. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir John, for a very, very elaborate and precise, but elaborate and emphatic initial remarks. We will come back to the last point that you made, which is the last statement or the sentence in the book. We'll come back to that a little later. Let me invite Professor Stephen Murgatroyd. Steve, your initial remarks, please.
Well, first of all, let me echo Sir John's comment about the book and its qualities. It's a remarkable collection of resources, rare to get to this kind of level of support and involvement from around the world, and beautifully produced by Routledge, who I must say are also my publisher, so it's good to see. So well done. I mean, I think that's the first thing to say. Listen, I teach about the future. So my kind of preoccupation on a daily basis is not what's happening right now, but what might happen going forward. But that work always begins with this bedrock kind of resource that's sitting here on my desk, like this book that you two have managed to pull together. So grounded in the past, we have to imagine different futures. And there isn't one future, there are many futures. But I think what's pretty clear right now, and it comes across in various ways in the book, is that we're at some kind of interregnum, a kind of tipping point between an old way of thinking and working and an emerging way of thinking and working. And what's changing is the dynamics of access and equity and inclusion. John mentioned the United States, but we could also mention several other countries that have never adopted equity as a principle, particularly if you happen to be gay or lesbian, or if you happen to be Black in the United States or Black in the UK. All sorts of issues around equity and inclusion. But the institutions are also facing kind of nightmare issues around money, around the changing nature of work, particularly dislocation of work as new skills and new ways of working emerge, home working versus being in the office, technology versus not technology, all sorts of changes in that dynamics. Environmental change, we can't ignore sustainable development issues, and particularly climate change issues, which have a big impact on how people operate in various parts of the world. So there's these kind of massive changes going on. And I want to suggest one way of reading this book is to use what we've been using in a lot of our teaching, which is the futures triangle. And here are simple questions, 3 simple questions. The first one is, what's the weight of the past? And the weight of the past is a lot of colonial kind of issues, which many are still struggling to get out of. Lots of structural issues in how open universities functioned. Lots of legacy issues around completion rates and dropout rates, and concerns of government about, oh, we can't afford all this cost to just throw it down the drain because so many people don't finish or don't complete, ignoring the value of what they actually did while they were engaged in learning. So there's some kind of weight of the past that's getting in the way of the future. There's the push of the present. So there's a push for leveraging more flexible forms of learning, micro-credentials, modular stackable learning, a lot more emphasis on competency-based assessment and PLAR. So lots of kind of push to kind of subtly change the game without losing the core business, which is teaching and learning in the way that leads to degrees, diplomas, and certificates. And then there's the pull of the future. And John has said, you know, artificial intelligence will not replace people. Well, correct, but it will be a co-intelligent partner to everything that we do. And people look at current versions of AI, and they should look at what's happening now versus, say, 2 years ago, where we've seen a massive improvement in the performance of AI systems. But they should also look at how close we are to what some are calling superintelligence or artificial general intelligence, which most of us think is about, will arrive about 2030, something like that, which is in futures terms tomorrow. And so what that means, and the push of the present is pushing us in this direction, is more and more people in the urban areas of the world having access to instant supports, personalized learning, adaptive learning, these kind of things, but increasing the divide between those in rural and urban, the rich and the poor, the technological skilled and the unskilled. And so we're in danger of actually increasing, because of technology, inequality. And so one of the jobs of the institutions that are captured in this book, and the others that should have contributed but didn't, is to reimagine their future. And we need to do that collaboratively, because there's no way any one institution can solve the problem of bringing together the dynamic forces that are reshaping the world. Now, that's where I get really anxious, because I think the history of sustained, successful, transformational change is just appalling in any kind of organizations. 90% of all major transformation efforts fail, whether it's in business, in government, anywhere else. And so we're not really good as a leadership species in managing major change and transformation. But in order to get out of the challenges of where we are and where we need to be, we're going to have to learn how to do some of that. And the best way to think about it is to collaborate to get to the next space. And I think a resource like this book helps us understand what the challenges of that kind of collaboration are. But as John said, no one size fits all. And so just because something works here in Canada or in Botswana or in Fiji doesn't mean to say it's going to work anywhere else, because everything has to be localized and understood in its own cultural and community context. So we're in a kind of interesting spot. And a resource like this book helps us understand how we got here but also points to some of the issues we're going to have to confront and address together. And so I think this is a powerful opportunity to have a great conversation.
Thank you, Steve, for an excellent articulation. We will, in fact, come back to this, you said, old ways of thinking and working and new ways of thinking and working. And vis-a-vis this book, that would also facilitate it, institutional leaders, policymakers, professors, researchers, non-government organizations, and those who are working in the grassroots level all together, because the Commonwealth of Learning, basically, if I quote, they've gone beyond the school and university education per se to non-formal education, agriculture, sustainability, and addressing the SDGs. So this is very interesting, and we will, in fact, come back to this with some, after your initial remarks, to delve a little deeper into these aspects subsequently. So let me get back to Sir John. Sir, as a business model, because you have tried out Open University in the United States also, which which did not really work out finally, but then there was an aspiration that it might work over there. And because the business model is becoming sucky, as we understand now, the OU, the British Open University, may also think about maybe going to dual mode or something. Some alternatives are coming out with technology. And Hong Kong Open University has already gone dual mode, and Chinese Open Universities are basically dual mode. In fact, they are multi-mode these days, as the book tells us. So as a business model, you have proposed the old, and which is still sustainable, still debatable in the policy circles, and the iron triangle: cost, access, and quality vis-a-vis technology. So to come back to these vis-a-vis the survival open universities and their sustainability, how do you think that mass education versus quality on the one hand, and access, quality, and cost? Because as you mentioned, the US, unfortunately, as you said, the US Department of Justice has in a way done away with access, equity, diversity, inclusion. So given these contexts, vis-a-vis, forgetting about the United States context for the time being, to come back to our story of open universities around the world, how do you visualize the business model and the future sustainable model for mass education versus quality and access, quality, and cost vis-a-vis technology? So.
Nice question. I think we're seeing that this session is basically dividing into a spokesman for the past, which is me, and a spokesman for the future, which is Stephen. So let me go really back into the past. I still firmly believe that the basic economic structure of open universities goes back to the economist and moral philosopher Adam Smith in the 18th century, where he was the first person to put his finger on the key changes that led to the Industrial Revolution. And there were three of them. There was, first of all, the division of labor. Instead of having one person making the whole of something in a cottage industry, there was division of labor, different people doing different things, which also meant, number two, specialization. I do one thing, then I pass it to you and you do another. And then, of course, finally, there were machines, which came into being in that same period and enabled many of these specialized tasks to be conducted much more efficiently and much more cheaply, and so on and so forth. What was interesting to me is that it really took until the creation of the Open University to apply those principles, division of labor, machines, and specialization, to education, even though they've been applied in the rest of society in many ways for many years. And I still think that's actually quite relevant in thinking about the futures of open universities. I make the point in this iron triangle, which everyone quotes, that if your Minister of Education aims for three things: access, quality, and low cost, you cannot achieve that with conventional teaching in classrooms, because if you work on one of those three vectors, you make the others worse. But technology allows you to bypass that. So it's very important that people designing the future of open universities remember that they need to still balance those particular components, which is why I said in my remarks that although there may be 10 affordances of openness, if you try and achieve all 10 at once, you'll probably collapse. You can make the analogy with buildings. If a building is too rigid, it will probably break and fall apart in a big earthquake. And if it's too flexible, it will just collapse anyway. You've got to get a kind of resilience which is there in the middle. So I think that's something that is quite a challenge for open universities. And the other point I'd make, and Stephen, I'm sure will comment more on this, I think throughout the history of distance learning, there has been an over reliance or an over expectation that technology will solve the problem. Technology has obviously been crucial to open universities, different technologies at different times, but it has to be blended in with a human infrastructure that works. It's interesting, it's not an open university, but one of the most interesting phenomena in the last 20 years has been the emergence of the University of Southern New Hampshire, which grew from being a campus with 2,000 people in residence to being a mega university with about 200,000 students all over the US and beyond. And it's fascinating to see how that happened. Obviously, they went online in a very big way and very competently. But the leader of that transformation is firm that what really made the difference was that they stayed true to their values of being close to the students by having counselors who stayed with each student throughout the time of the university. And this was why they did far better than other institutions dealing with the same kind of midlife students in difficult positions and so on. So I'll leave it there, but I think we've got to be careful about being too transfixed by technology, and we've got to remember that there is an economic structure which has been part of the success of open universities, and we forget that at our peril.
Thank you, Sir John. And the last point was very important because part of the business model that access, equity, quality, and finally cost. Because cost effectiveness, cost efficiency, they are very critical to us. And in fact, these days, OUs are also critically talking about return on investment, because that is an area which the leaders are looking forward to. And not that all open universities have been able to achieve that point, where because in our part of the world, access is the major issue vis-a-vis quality. And if equity could be added to that, it will be interesting. And in any case, we are cost effective. So in the Asian open universities have been cost effective much more than any others in other parts of the world. But your last point about technology, I'll come back to Professor Stephen. Steve, you wrote that book on artificial intelligence and higher education, and you have been propagating, writing, speculating the future of technology vis-a-vis artificial intelligence, generative AI, and their use in the open universities. In fact, Elon Musk project of that chip, which will get into the human brain and then artificial intelligence. They said that sort of aliens, I mean, human beings will be converted into aliens, the kind of thing. I'm not pretty sure what exactly that would be, but then that's the future. So that's also part of the future. So they say that emotion, human touch, ethics, and wisdom, if at all, artificial intelligence can do these. including wisdom. And wisdom in a different way. In the Eastern part of the world, we understand wisdom much deeper than what human intelligence can do. Playing with emotion, touch, and so on and so forth. That's one side of the story. The other is the disadvantaged sections of the society, those who are in the remote areas, and so on and so forth. So how do you visualize that vis-a-vis our open universities, that technology per se, and more particularly artificial intelligence, generative AI, maybe open AI sort of things could address? And what could be the future that you look at, Steve?
So the first thing I'd say is never believe anything Elon Musk or Sam Altman says. Don't buy the hype. Wisdom is something that we are nowhere near capable of doing technologically. And I would encourage people to read Audrey Waters rather than Elon Musk. But and I also agree with Sir John, which is that the real opportunity is to see the technology resources, whether it's quantum computing, whether it's AI, whether it's implants, whether it's another technology like robotics, to see all these as co-intelligent partners in the delivery of quality learning. It's not either us or them, it's about how we manage the affordances of AI, the affordances of compassionate robots, for example, which are emerging now and being deployed significantly in elder care. How do we deploy these in a way that helps the neurodiverse student or the student with specific disabilities? And in terms of implants, I mean, I think that we will see major developments there in wearables that actually replicate what some of the implants can do. So you're going to see some massive changes on the technology front. But I don't think that's got anything to do with the business model, other than to add to the cost structure and the risk structure of the institutions. I think it's more likely that we're going to start seeing two things. One is more and more collaborations. So if you look at one of the examples I've been really trying to get my head around, which is in Eindhoven, in the Netherlands, looking at a thing called Brainport Eindhoven, where not just universities, but colleges, universities, and adult learning providers are collaborating to meet the needs of learners in that community. So whether it's the need for boot camps or short courses or micro-credentials, the collaboratory provides that service. And to do that, they've had to unbundle the assessment of learning and competencies. So one of the things I'm seeing is collaboration. And the other thing I'm seeing is some degree of unbundling, especially of assessment leading to competency-based certification for skills. Now, the other thing that I think is changing, I'm highly involved in this right now with a couple of clients around the world, is a reimagining of what quality looks like. So historically, and I've been very involved in quality. I actually wrote the regulations for a jurisdiction in Canada, and I've done 51 program evaluations and 9 institutional evaluations since 2005. And I would say that the model of quality that we've been using is broken, and that we need to reimagine quality in terms of the learning experience that students have and the way in which the learning is enabling them to scaffold knowledge and build metacognition. And so I think we need not only to reimagine assessment and the whole institutional strategy for assessment, collaboration, but also our understanding of what quality is. And if we did those things, I think we could increase access. Now, I think, you know, one of the things that the examples of significant change, whether it's in Mexico or in Europe or in parts of Africa that I've been looking at, are all involved in rethinking that triangle that John quite rightly draws our attention to. But there's not one element of that that can remain the same in the light of the changes that are taking place that I mentioned at the beginning. So I think we have to reimagine the components of the triangle in order to understand where the future will take us. But I would think about, rather than looking at dual mode, I'd say, what are they really doing? They're trying to increase flexible responses to learner needs. And one of the ways they do that is through collaboration, and another is unbundling of assessment. And I think that's going to be, from a policy point of view, given how bad we are at meeting the skills demands of the economy, I think you're going to see a policy push to unbundle assessment of skills and competencies. So I think we're at this, again, the interregnum, this kind of pivot point where we're going to see lots of change.
Interesting, very interesting. Thank you, Steve. In my part of the world, we also see the TVET, and the general higher education is also now becoming competency-based, and therefore they're looking at seriously changing, revising. Maybe there is a paradigm shift in assessment, because assessment is an area where they are going to, and assessment is the area, I must say, that where a lot of reforms are necessary. So we'll come back to this to your chapter conclusions. To be a little more specific, to come back our story of open universities, Sir John's chapter's last paragraph, he has already talked about that. Let me read out loud. But before that, let me say that we are still struggling between our traditional course team approach and learning support center approach on the one hand, and intelligence networked flexible learning on the other. So, and these two are working parallelly, and universities have not been able to converse these two into their business model and into their day-to-day operation. Let me read out what, again, for our readers, those who have not been able to get hold of the copy of the book, let me read out loud for you Sir John's conclusion in the chapter that he will read. I quote, over my 11 years as UKOU British Open University Vice Chancellor, I conversed with some 50,000 graduating students at well over 100 convocation ceremonies. They often told me how certain courses had transformed their lives by giving them new perspectives. Open universities must retain the imagination to show that courses created by multidisciplinary teams of human intelligence can light fires in the minds as bright or brighter than the courses produced by artificial intelligence, including these days Khan Academy, Coursera, and all kinds of things that are over there. Sir John, this needs a little more from our side and little more elaboration and explanation vis-a-vis the old course team approach and the new intelligent flexible learning system. Sir.
Yes, I think, first of all, the big problem with the course team approach is that it's expensive. And in order to make it work, you have to have very large numbers of people. And so to be able to amortize the course, the cost of the course over a lot of people. And that becomes difficult, first of all, if you don't have many people, but also if you're offering shorter courses, changing them more frequently. So there's a problem with that. But I still believe that it's very important. And Steve put his finger on it when he talked about collaboration, that if people collaborate on producing a course, the chances are it's better than if one person does it alone. I will remember when I was Vice Chancellor of the Open University, I had a brilliant human geographer, and she was often approached by other universities of prestige and so on to go and join them because she was very well known in her discipline. And one day I said to her, Doreen, why do you stay with the Open University when you have all these offers from Oxford and London School of Economics and so on? And she said, I'll tell you, it's very simple. At the Open University, we work in teams, and I find the stimulation of working in a course team is so exciting that I'm not prepared. And then we have an impact on large volumes of people. I'm not prepared to give that up in order to teach small groups of people and have a different kind of mechanism. The other interesting point, I think, that to go with that has to do with the University of Southern New Hampshire, which I mentioned. One of the very interesting points that he makes, LeBlanc, when he talks about that, is that in order to get that to work, to expand it from 2,000 to 200,000, he had to completely separate the team doing the mega university part of it from the campus, because the campus people wanted to slow everything down and stop him doing the innovative things he wanted to do. So that there is a problem there. As far as dual mode goes, last comment, I think, first of all, I'm not very closely in touch with the UK Open University at the moment, but I think they've given up on the idea of starting a campus operation in the town, which may make sense for the reasons I just evoked, that they two don't necessarily go together very well. So, but you can, without doing dual mode, you can collaborate with other people. And for example, one of the things that many universities are doing when they try to get into distance learning is to contract out the student support and assessment to firms that specialize in that. Many years ago, I worked with a group called Academic Partnerships based out of Texas, who basically offer to take over the student support function of the university that's offering courses at a distance. And they do it very well, because it's back to specialization. If you concentrate on doing something very well, chances are you do it better than someone who does that as part of a long list of things that they're trying to do at the same time.
Okay.
Excellent analysis. Yes, Dr. Misra, we have maybe 5-7 minutes more, maybe 5 minutes more, 5 to 7 minutes more.
So
Yes, yes.
I have two questions before we close this session. One for Stephen and one for Sir John. Stephen, I will go back to the initial remarks where you talked about the increasing inequality due to the emergence of new technologies. In the context of that increasing inequality, what kind of roles that you see the open universities to do, and along with open universities, what is the role that you see from the governments and others to reduce that inequality and divide? Because open universities are essentially doing democratizing education as such, and in that context, this is something that I want you to quickly reflect from a futuristic perspective.
So if I was going to do one thing, I would actually transform teacher education through the work of open universities. The OU UK, when it got into teacher education, particularly into the certification business, had a massive impact on the profession. And I think that kind of level and the scale at which we need to intervene in the system to build digital literacy and fluency skills, but also to reinforce the importance of compassion-based learning and human-based learning, that combination of technology plus people. I think many of the teachers I work with, and I teach in the Faculty of Education at the University of Alberta, I don't think they are aware or understand the potential of the technology or its risk. The students do. We're working with 1,000 students in Toronto who've been researching what their peers are doing with learning and technology. And the students are raising more ethical and bias and prejudice issues than the teachers are. And that's because they have more exposure to this stuff. So I think if there's one thing we should be doing as open universities is reimagining what we could be doing as a collaboration of institutions to build digital literacy and fluency across the community, but especially through our K-12 school system, our primary and secondary school system. That's where we could transform communities and have real impact. So that's my big kind of agenda. And I mean, governments have no clue about any of this stuff. Just look at some of the policy kind of nonsense that's coming out of various governments. We're trying to regulate something that's moving faster than, basically than most motor cars can go. And we're still trying to regulate the original Ford car through the AI regulations rather than the Ferrari that I'm actually driving right now in AI terms. So, governments aren't where we should look. We should take responsibility for transforming teacher education and digital literacy and fluency in our communities. If we did that, we'd actually get ourselves ready for a better experience for our learners for anything that they want to study.
I think that's a great point to focus on teacher training, which has been part of the ODL agenda to increase the number of trained teachers. Sir John, I'll come back to you and ask something, and you said that with one is futuristic, one is historical kind of things happening today. But from that perspective, you have seen the growth and development of open universities around the world. So from that perspective, I want you to share with us your views about what do you see are the contributions of open university to the society, to the development, to the international development. People often have this question, what is that open universities are doing? They're of low quality, this and that, and all sorts of things goes on, which I don't agree, and I often fight with people about the importance of open universities. But we would like to listen from you. What do you see that the contribution of open universities to the world, to the society?
Well, when the Open University was created, a very small proportion of the British population managed to go to university. And it was generally true in other countries as well, even though the US post-World War II already had a much larger proportion of its population going to university. So there were a lot of people who wanted and had the competence to do university studies who were not getting them. I think the open universities helped, along with an expansion of the rest of the system, to increase that. While that was going on, governments began to realize that development and successful economies depend not just on having a well-educated elite, but also on having a well-educated population generally. And I think the open universities have contributed to that. One of the questions I've often asked myself is, why are some open universities successful and others aren't? And I think a lot of it comes back to the leadership. The founders of many of the successful open universities, UKOU, IGNU under Ram Reddy, Sukhothai Thammasat Open University, the people who founded those really had fire in their bellies, as they say, about access and getting to the real people. The next generation often were simply looking for vice chancellorships and were not particularly interested in the fact of it being an open university. I mean, I think this is particularly, I'm sad to say, in India, where many of the state universities didn't go anywhere because the people's heart really wasn't in it. They were hoping that being vice chancellor of a state university would be a stepping stone on the way to being vice chancellor of a more prestigious university. So it is absolutely important that the people creating them believe in what they're doing and are not too bothered by looking over their shoulders at what the conventional universities think are the indicators of quality. So the contribution, I think, is to stay very hard with those people who are not finding it easy to get to where they want to get to in life, know that they need more education to do it, and are looking for very convenient ways of doing it. And again, I don't want to keep coming back to the University of Southern New Hampshire, but it's a wonderful case study of a guy who decided he was going to stick with the mission that the university originally had of dealing with ordinary people in difficult midlife situations and taking them forward into something better. And he stuck with that very, very vigorously and ignored all the pressures to do the things that universities like to do in the name of quality, and has been very successful.
Thank you, Sir John. Prof. Panda, if you have any final remarks from you.
No, it has been very
before
interesting,
we-
very interesting indeed. If you would like, we are almost reaching the end. You may like to conclude and with a brief.
Thank you, Professor Panda. Thank you, everyone. We are actually thankful to all our 118 authors who contributed to the 57 chapters, and including contributions from 47 universities covered in this book. We will try to have some more book discussion sessions like this one with authors to have wide dissemination and better understanding about the contributions of open universities to the world of development, especially increasing access, improving quality, and of course, leveraging technology for the future. Today, we would like to sincerely thank Sir John Daniel and Professor Stephen Murgatroyd for your kind participation and sharing your thoughts with us. We are really privileged to have your insights and your contribution to the book. Thank you.
And all over the world, they will get this insight when you put on YouTube or maybe on social media and elsewhere. Very interesting. Well, from my side also, thank you very much, Sir John and Professor Stephen. Our deepest regards to both of you. Thank you.